Have you ever thought as a business owner, you actually can fall based on your personality into one of 5 types of business owners? Yep, that's right. We're going to break it down in this episode.
You are not just another hustling salesperson. You are the expert, the resource, the valuable partner for your clients. And how you grow your business should reflect how your clients see you. Welcome to the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. We generate referrals without asking, build positive client experiences, and help you take control of your business. Here's your charmingly sarcastic host, Stacey Brown Randall.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 198 of the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Brown Randall. Okay, we are starting with a 2-part interview series here, and I am very, very excited to have you guys listen in to this interview because I find the work that Naomi Gora does fascinating. So, real quick, how did I meet Naomi? Let me give you the backstory. I actually met Naomi when she found me because of my book. So she found my book, Generating Business Referrals Without Asking. She bought it from Amazon or wherever she bought it from and read it and instantly thought of a client that she had that she needed to refer to me. It's pretty amazing. So she referred me a CPA firm or an accounting firm in Australia last year. And I've been working with him since 4th quarter of last year. And he's awesome. And so let me just first say this. Guys, when somebody refers you that you don't know, engage with them. It's like a pro tip, like low-hanging fruit, like somebody who doesn't know you at all and chooses to refer to you because they've come to trust you through some other means other than having somebody say, hey, you should definitely refer people to Stacey, right? She found my book. She read it. She was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect for Matthew and a few of my other clients. So she reached out to me. We had a great conversation. Then she referred me her client who became my client. And then I got to learn a little bit about what she does. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. So this is what Naomi does. So she is a brand agency that uses personality for how best likely that you are to run a business and the marketing channels that you would deploy based on your personality. So she uses the Myers-Briggs personality assessment, those 4-letter codes, to really unlock cognitive functions of how you best operate and then would be best suited to run your business. So she's going to break down these 5 personality types. And what I had her do is we did 2 interviews. She's going to break down the 5 personality types of these business owners by grouping these Myers-Briggs personality 4-letter code assessments. She's going to break them down for you. And then in the next episode, episode 199, that'll come out next week, she's then going to talk about the number 1 trap that those business owners find themselves in when running their business, which is awesome. But before we dive in, and you can learn all the amazing things from Naomi Gora, who is the CEO and the lead strategist of Brand Whisperers. Before we dive into the episode, let me give you her official bio. Identifying as an INFP on the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator, Naomi spent many years trying to find her place in the world of media, marketing, and advertising agencies. Often feeling like an outsider in the more extroverted world of sales and marketing, it was only when she discovered her personality type and allowed herself to run her business her own way based on her strengths and core values that her business really started to thrive. It's now described by some as the Eat, Pray, Love meets Mad Men. Naomi is the founder of Brand Whisperers, a brand agency that gives business owners the permission and the insight to tap into their own inner genius and unique way of doing business. So guys, here's my interview with Naomi. Okay, Naomi, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today because I think what you do is fascinating. And it's also really fun for me to have somebody on the podcast who found my book, as people know, because I just talked about this a little bit in the intro, but found my book and was like, oh my gosh, this is great for one of my clients. And then referred me to your client, which I just think is awesome. And now I'm working with him, which I'm having such a good time. He's such a hoot. And I love that all of this happened halfway around the world from where I am located in Charlotte, North Carolina, because you guys are in Australia. So this is amazing, isn't it? It is just amazing. It's the world is such a small place when we allow it to be, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to dive in because when you first reached out to me and you're like, I've got a client who definitely needs what you do. This is going to be great. And we kind of had a conversation before you kind of made the official referral into Matt. I just asked you a little bit about what you did because I saw your email signature and I was like, that's interesting, right? I'm a curious person. So I asked you what you did and then you started telling me and I was like, oh, I've got to have you on the podcast. Like, this is going to be so good.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm so glad that you're here. And so folks, just so you know, this is going to be a 2-part episode that I'm going to do with Naomi because there's some goodness we want to break into. And when she sent me all the things we could talk about, there were 2 that jumped out at me that I was like, this. And I was like, there's no way we're going to get this into like a 15-20 minute interview. So we're going to break this into 2 parts. So she'll be back next week as well. And we will dive into more of this with her. But first, we're going to back up. And I just want you, Naomi, to kind of explain what you do. And specifically, it's like personality-based branding. I just think the idea behind it is like taking something traditional, which is like personality-based test, right? Like assessments, but using it in a way to help your clients from a branding, but also the way they run their business perspective based on them knowing themselves, know thyself, right? Like,
yes, that's exactly it.
I think it's fascinating, something I'd never probably really even thought about. So why don't you just break it down for us exactly kind of like what you do and then exactly what it looks like in terms of how you help your clients?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Stacey. Thanks for having me on. And I can't wait to chat about this. So yes, I'll dive in. So my background is branding and marketing. I run a brand agency. And for many years, I ran a traditional brand agency until I happened upon personality types. And for many of you, you may have heard of personality types like the Myers-Briggs system and the 4-letter code. But the system I've been trained to use actually uses those letters as a decoder ring or a code to look deeper into the cognitive functions that you use if that's your type. So we do have a framework, and this does go fairly in depth, but I'll just give the overview. So if you're happy for me to just run through the framework that we use.
Yep, absolutely.
So if you imagine your mind is like a 4-person car, so you've got your driver in the front of the car and then a co-pilot next to them. And then in the back of the car, you've got a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old. So 10-year-old and a 3-year-old.
That's like some people's worst nightmare.
A 10-year-old and a 3-year-old in the back of the car. Exactly. And so if you take this, I guess, these are the cognitive functions that we use. So depending on your personality type, you use 4 cognitive functions in a particular order. And depending on what order it is in your car, the cognitive function looks different. So your driver and your co-pilot, they're pretty sophisticated, right? They know where they're going. They've got a strategy. They're pretty comfortable. And then the 10-year-old and the 3-year-old, the 10-year-old is pretty sophisticated, but you probably wouldn't give it a lot of really complex things to do. And then your 3-year-old, we all love a 3-year-old. We love hanging out with 3-year-olds. They're good fun, but you wouldn't let them drive your car. So that's the model that we use with building businesses is we look at your personality type, we look at the cognitive functions that you use, and we see based on your industry and what your business actually is, how much you are running it from the back seat of your car. Like, is your 3-year-old driving your business? And if so, you're probably really stressed or burnt out. So what we try and do when we're setting up these brands for people, we use a really holistic view. We look at your personality type and how that means you run your business. So your business model, your business offerings, your price points, and your marketing. And so we look at how you're likely to market and run your business, and then we create the brand around that structure in a way that's really going to support you and help you grow your business fast, rather than sort of looking at how you think you should do it and diving in and then getting really stressed out or failing or things not going well because you're not doing it in a way that suits you.
So, okay, I think you brought up a great point. And that is the thing of building your business and running the business the way you think you're supposed to versus acknowledging that you could probably be more successful if you removed what you think you're supposed to do and actually do what would work for you. But I think to that point, that's kind of like an unknown, like I think in theory, we're like, yeah, but in like practical moments or, those experiences that happen, it's like most people don't know how they would normally think about running their business. They're just copycatting like other people around them. And so from that perspective, they're kind of at this place of like, well, I don't know what else there is. So that's why I love that you take this whole idea and you've mapped it to this other framework that kind of explains really like the categories of how people think about running a business. Yes. And then digging into those categories. And that's mapping it, based on the codes, right? From within the personality-based assessments is mapping some codes into these 5 kind of categories and then figuring out and telling folks, but this is how you should build your business. So why don't you give us an overview, kind of like that high level overview of those 5 personality categories. And then what I would love to do is let's use Matt. We didn't ask for permission, but I'm sure he'll be fine.
He would. I know we both know Matt quite well. He'd be like, "Go for it. Yeah,
just talk about me." Cool. Actually, you know what he would say? He'd be like, "Smart women talking about me. Talk about me all day long."
That's exactly what he would say.
Yes, he's awesome. I love working with him. Okay, but then I want to get practical with it. So before we like unpack me, let's unpack Matt first. That's a little bit easier for me. So let's talk about these. And I love the names you have for these when you're taking that personality assessments, right? And you're taking those codes with Myers-Briggs and all that kind of stuff. And then you're funneling them into like these categories of how business owners can build their business. We've got our corporates, we've got our traditionalist, we've got our individual. Okay, now I'm going to struggle with that word. I said it fine before we hit record.
You did several times.
Okay, individualists, life seekers, and change makers. So let's give us the high level, like what are those? And then talk about where you see people trying to put themselves without recognizing maybe where they should be. Let's start with that before we, unpack our dear friend, Matt.
Okay, that sounds like a really good plan. Yes, so the overview of the corporates and the traditionalists, the individualists, life seekers, and the change makers, these are categories I have come up with after working with many businesses. I started using the personality types on my own type and business. And then I thought, what would happen if I applied this to my clients as they were coming through? And I started to notice patterns. And so I've made these categories based on some patterns that I see when people are starting or running businesses. And so the corporates are what we would traditionally think of, I guess, as running a business or running a big business. So the cognitive function, when I talk about that 4-person car, the driver function that they use, the corporates use, is called effectiveness. And this is all about resource management. So these people can manage resources in their sleep. They have to-do lists that the rest of us would take, a week to do, and they're done by 10 a.m. going, what's next sort of thing. So they're really good at logistics and managing large numbers of people. And so quite naturally, they're already attuned to running a business because they already get this. This is sort of like their innate way of running a business. And so that's why you can often see big businesses looking like this, because naturally those personality types can be drawn to that, which doesn't mean that other personality types can't run big businesses. That's not what we're saying at all. But this is like the trend, I guess. So then when other people come in to start running their businesses, they look at these corporate types and think, well, that's the way to run a business, without knowing that based on their personality type and their preferences, that might not just work for them. And then they'll burn themselves out or stress themselves out. And so these other categories I've created is to sort of lead people into more self-awareness of, like, you don't have to do it that way. You can, but if you choose to, there may be an easier way. So the individualists, they lead with an introverted cognitive function that means personal integrity is really essential to them. And that's not to say that personal integrity isn't important to every personality type. But when they're running their business, it can be the core of how they run their business. So while somebody that ran their business from an effectiveness point of view, they can go, oh, these things are important to my integrity, but basically, what's the outcome we're looking for? And they balance it out a bit more. Whereas the individualists are going, this is my personal integrity, and the outcome be damned. And when you're looking at running a business, you can see how maybe the outcome, which could be results or profitability, could be affected. So, which doesn't mean that those types can't have profitable businesses. It's just about helping them tap into that integrity point and going, how much are you emphasizing this in your business? And is there a way that we can help you look at your profitability and your outcomes as well? So you get both sides of the coin, if that, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So that's our corporates. And the other one I can't pronounce.
And the individualists. And then so the next, I was going to say life seekers, but that's Matt. So I'll leave that till the end, as that's what we're going to lead into. So then the next one is our traditionalists. And these types, I often find they're really good at creating traditions and creating systems and creating rituals that then they live by. So often I find the traditionalists, they're brilliant at setting up systems and running systems, but there's also a hint of either community or really strong family ties to their businesses. So I've just had 3 businesses come through that I've branded recently. And without me telling them to include family in their branding, it has just naturally come up. Like they're either businesses that have been owned by their parents and, the business has been running for 50 years and they need to rebrand, but they were feeling like really hesitant about moving away from that thing that their parents had created. So it was like, how do we rebrand this company to be new and modern, but still hold those family ties that were so important to their story? So often these types will have a tradition or a past that they really want to hold on to, really community focused. And that's a really important point. So for these people, that community vibe can be more important than the outcomes. So that's something that they really need to consider in their branding and their marketing. The other type is the change makers. So the change makers use a cognitive function we call perspective. So these people are really good at pattern recognition and looking behind the curtains of life. So they go deep into, they take something and they go, why is that there? They look at the consequences of things, really deep-ranging consequences. And so they're often throwing things forward into the future, looking at, well, what could be the outcomes of this? So they often come up with these ideas of how the world can change to be a better place. So often change makers are in the realm of either personal health, personal transformation, or cultural transformation, change management in bigger organizations, because they have a knack of seeing the consequences or the outcomes of things that the rest of us can't see yet. And sometimes it can be quite frustrating for them because they go, I know this is going to happen. And then the other people in business, the other people that want stats and facts and, prove it to me, they go, well, I can't prove it to you. I've got this feeling. So they can often find it tough in their businesses because nobody's believing them. So they're like, I just know that this is going to happen. And quite often that they're right. So these types are often involved in, they can be involved in spiritual things, change management, but they have like a bigger message to spread to the world. And they're actually a really small percentage of the population. So if you're one of these change maker types that are only like a few % of the population, but you're trying to run your business as a corporate, it's probably not going to work because you just have such a different way of looking at the world.
That's awesome. Okay. So then tell us about life seekers. And then I got to come back and ask a question about some of the stuff that you've been saying.
Okay, cool. So the life seekers, they want to squeeze every drop of life out of their life. Every experience is like, how can we make the most out of this experience? They love sensory experiences. They love novelty. They love new things. So often these people, and there are a lot of my clients, and I just love them so dearly because they want the best for everybody. They want everybody to have these amazing life experiences. But the admin and the routine of running a business can really get them down. So if they're running their business and they're still trying to do their bookkeeping and their admin and their project management and following through on quotes, they can get really bogged down. Whereas where they should be is really engaging people, speaking to people, having conversations with people, setting up experiences that make people really light up and feel like they're alive. And so, admin and stuff, that's not making people feel like they're alive. So if they get themselves stuck in there, they're really not going to like their businesses very much.
Okay, so you've kind of given a really cool high level of what these 5 types are. And I know they all ultimately map back, right, to personality assessments. And you kind of take of those I think you said like, there was like the 16 personality types.
Yep.
They can all kind of be grouped together and each like they come together as groups to form each of these 5. But for the person listening right now, they're like, wait, but Naomi, like I'm a little bit of each of those that you just said. Like maybe not always, but there's a piece of me that feels like I could fit maybe into any of those. And maybe some people are listening, they're like, oh my gosh, she said traditionalist and that was all me, right? Like I know some people probably heard that and they're like, that's what I am. But for the person who feels like they can float between them, what is like the defining factors that you use to kind of say corporates, traditionalist, right? Individualists, life seekers, and change makers? What is like the defining boundaries or factors into those 5?
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good question. So the thing that puts those in those categories really are their cognitive functions. So when you work with us, we do a test. So you do the personality test to determine your 4-letter code personality type. And there is sometimes an error rate on those tests. So when you come and work with us, my team is trained in profiling. So we ask lots of questions to make sure it is the right type. Because what I found, so for an example, say one of the life seekers, I find that sometimes life seekers can be so, from a young age, they can be told that their head wasn't screwed on right, that they can't finish things. So from a young age, these personality types are sometimes through school and corporate work are sort of culturally, I don't want to say forced, but molded, I guess, to not be themselves. So they can come up as really organized, but it really stresses them out. So through this personality profiling, when you come and work with us and we have these conversations, we try and unpack, well, how much of this is you and how much of this makes you feel good and how much of this is because you think you should do it. So in terms of like you said, like it's a really good question. Some of these things may apply to me in all of these cases. We dig a lot deeper than that with each of those specific personality types and go, well, in what cases do you look like this? And what cases do you enjoy that? And then we mold that specifically to their businesses to figure out why they're doing it and if they're doing it for the right reasons, if it makes them happy or they just do it because they think they should. Has been, a common theme of our chat is like whether you think you should or if it's really you. So it really does come down to those cognitive functions and getting that correct and then looking at the particular business and creating that framework or that plan based on those things. So you're right, the categories can look a bit like anyone. So I guess it's a bit like Harry Potter, and the sorting hat. We help you sort your hat into the right category.
And if anyone listening is not a Harry Potter fan, like myself, and I was like, I don't know what the sorting hat is, I did understand it from your example there, right?
It's essentially like you could have like bits, you could have bits of everything, but essentially you're going to pick one hat and we help you find that.
Okay. So what I really think is cool about the way you guys do the work that you do is not only do you understand their 4-letter code for their personality, and then you dig in to more profiling in a good way, not profiling in a bad way, right? But you dig in to do more profiling to really understand them. But it's not just to understand them. You then use that, right? And all that information you have on them to figure out how they're best likely to run their business. And on top of that, help them create a brand. And then the ways that they're going to share that brand with the world in a way that they will actually want to do it. So my best example of this is it's like when the latest social media channel comes out, like, oh, you've got to get on TikTok. Oh, you've got to get on Clubhouse. I'm like, shoot me in the head. Like I'm just still trying to figure out Instagram. I want to go hang out on LinkedIn and Facebook because that's where my old soul is actually comfortable. And I think that me saying something like that, right, you'd probably like, oh yeah, because I can put Stacy, she's probably more in this category. Because if you created a brand for me and then you're like, now go dance on TikTok, I'll be like, you're fired.
Absolutely.
I'm not doing that.
Absolutely. And that's such a good point. And that's what we do find when we're working with people is often, back in the day, I started branding many years ago, and it was just like, well, you create a logo and you create a suite of, collateral and business cards and letterheads and social media content and a big fat website. And now there's email marketing campaigns and, setting that all up as part of a branding, and marketing agency, that can be quite large. and quite costly. So what we use the personality typing to look at everything holistically and go, before we even start your brand, we say, well, how are you planning on marketing your business? So it's sort of like marketing informed branding, because what's the point of having, a 50-page website if you're never going to use it? Or if, like, say, for example, your clients, referral-based businesses, do you need social media templates? Like, is social media really something that you want to get into? Or could you get a lot more business and build your business a lot faster if you just really dedicated yourself to referrals for 1 year and went really hard, rather than spreading yourself really thin across a range of things and putting money, because it does take money to set all your time, if you're doing it yourself, to set up all these channels, like you said, TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. And that's just social media. That's not all the other marketing channels you could be doing.
I mean, you're right. We didn't even talk about Pinterest or YouTube right? Like, it's just, it goes on and on and on. So I love how you kind of help them understand. Okay, so let's real quick, because I don't want Matt to think we were talking about him too much. Real quick, break him. Okay, so for those of you who may have forgotten, I said this in the introduction, but Matt owns an accountancy firm, a CPA firm in Australia. One of Naomi's clients that she had referred to me. So I have gotten to know him as well. But just high level, tell me a little bit about him, from how he runs his firm based on those 5 categories.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great example to really illustrate this. So Matt falls into the life seekers category.
Yes, he does.
So there are four personality types in the life seekers category: ENFPs, ESFPs, ESTPs, and ENTPs. And so all these types lead with cognitive functions that are either exploration or sensation, which means they're very much in the moment. They want to experience new things. They want to experience sensory highs. So Matt's type, the ENFP, we call the BFF, as in like best friend forever. So these types in business, they're incredible problem solvers. They see the potential in everyone. They're just charming. You can't help but like an ENFP. So when it came to Matt's business, without a doubt, as soon as I started talking to him, I'm like, mate, sorry, being very Australian, referrals are where you at, like referrals, because he's like, oh, should we make a really big website and start to run Google ads, and should we do all these other things? I'm like, look at you, you just need to be in front of people. So for ENFPs, sometimes their brand doesn't matter so much in terms of like, well, what colors you use. Like, so say for an individualist, they would be like, these colors have to represent me and have to represent, the accuracy, the quality of my product. Like, this is really important. But for the BFF, it's like, colors, schmullers. Like, once you get Matt out in front of people, they don't need a website. They're just like, shake his hand and off we go. And I can't wait to work with you. So instead of spending a lot of time on building like digital assets for him, like he's still going to have a website, but it's just not going to be this massive thing that's going to be used as a digital marketing tool. Where Matt shines is getting in front of people face to face. And what I find is ENFPs are really good at having conversations. That's really their marketing strategy, is have really good conversations with people and use the tools around you, whether it's digital or in person, to have those conversations, and people will book with you. They just book with them straight away if they've got the tools to support them.
You know what I love about what you're saying? Because for me, I'm always like, yes, if you like people and you believe that you should take care of the people who take care of your business, right? The people who refer business to you, then of course you should want to do referrals. And then sometimes I see other businesses, they're like, I would just rather go run Google ads. And I'm like, why? Why would you rather go run Google ads or Facebook ads to get your business when you could just get them by referrals, because it's easier and they're better clients? And right now I've got all my scientific, like all the reasons why you should do it this way and get referrals. But you're so right, because at the end of the day, like obviously many of these personalities can build a business from a referral perspective. But when you're building a business by referrals, it is going to be relationship based, and it is going to take more time than pushing a button on a Facebook ad and tweaking it behind the scenes to run. And so I think that's such a good point as you kind of are talking about that. Like, yes, I can see lots of different of these categories, like leveraging referrals, but then I can also see others who are like, yeah, that's just not my thing. And I think sometimes I forget that. Like, I'm like, what do you mean you want to do ads? Like you want to do a lead generation campaign? Like what? Like, how do you not want to do referrals? Because it's not for everybody, right? I always say about referrals, your referrals that you're going to receive are not based on your personality, meaning you can be an introvert or an extrovert, right? You can be super quiet or super loud, and you can still generate referrals leaning into that with the relationships that you build with people. But the truth is there are people out there who are like, but I don't want to get referrals. I want to do it this way. And this just kind of reminded me of that, of like, well, duh, of course, right? Like, because that's probably based on how they're not allowing their 10-year-old or 3-year-old to drive the car. They're allowing their driver and the co-pilot to drive the car.
Absolutely. So I'll give you an example of that. So the opposite, so not the exact opposite side of Matt and referrals, but so one of the individualist types is the INTP. They're often quite technical. Their cognitive function that is in their driver's seat is accuracy. So they want things to be really factual, really logical, really accurate. And their 3-year-old is what we call harmony. It's understanding social constructs. It's understanding, meeting the needs of other people. And I've got a lot of INTP clients and friends, and sometimes to them it feels like when it comes to social situations that they didn't get the memo. It's like, it's not that we don't want to, it's just that sometimes we don't really understand how it works. And every time we step out there, we do it wrong, and then we feel really crap. And so I've got a couple of clients that have built their businesses. They're completely private because they're INTPs and they want to stay private. They don't want to be the face of their brands. So they're not mentioned anywhere on their websites. They have a brand. And this is another thing that we do. So we help them create a brand, because when they were coming into business and they were reading about how to run a business, they're like, everything's about stories. Everything's about, you have to share your personal story to make your business successful. And they're like, I don't want to do that. I said, it's okay. We don't have to do that. So we help them create their brand that does not mention them at all, but still connects to people. And they run their business solely through SEO, search engine optimization, and ads and email marketing. Because they're like, okay, well, I've set up, and that's sort of like their social construct. They're like, I've set up what I think they should say in the emails, and I think that's right, and I've had help to do that, and now it just runs, and I don't have to think about how to do those social things anymore because it stresses me out.
I mean, let's be honest, there's probably all of us listening right now, no matter what our personality types is like, okay, those folks have it figured out. Like, push the button, build it correctly the first time, and let it run, right? Like, I don't think I could live in that world for all too long, but it's true, right? I mean, and I think that's what's important. And that's what I want, like, as the folks are listening to this episode, and what's really cool is you're going to come back. So you're going to be back with us next week, and we're going to dig into these 5 types a little bit more, but specifically with the number one trap that each personality type can fall into when they're growing their business. And so that people can be aware of that. And we can dive in more into what the 4-letter codes are in each of these 5, so people can understand that, particularly if they go to your website and they decide to take the assessment and they kind of get an understanding of who they are. Then as we talk about it next week, they can really figure out, okay, so where am I? And let me make sure I'm not falling into this trap. I think that would be super valuable. So folks, you got like a week to get your quiz done. Take this assessment, right? We will put all the links to Naomi's website in the show notes page. But Naomi, before I forget, why don't you just go ahead and tell us, where can they go to take the personality assessment if they want to take that now, so they're keyed up and ready for next week's episode?
Absolutely. Just head to brandwhisperers.com.au. So we are Australian. We've got an Australian domain. So if you leave that AU off, you won't get there. So brandwhisperers.com.au.
Perfect. And we will make sure to put that in the show notes so that everybody can find that for this episode. And guys, it's just like remembering that Stacy has an E. When you go to Naomi's site, you got to remember it's .au. Right. So it's like, there's always something, but okay. So I wanted to plug that before I forgot, because I think if people have that taken, and then we come back next week and we talk about these traps that sometimes the personality can fall into when they're trying to grow their business, I think it really builds on what we're talking about right now. right? From that
Absolutely.
perspective of what it looks like moving forward with these types. And I think you've given us this amazing overview, and I'm so excited to go deeper into it with our next episode. So I was getting ready to ask you a question. I'm like, nope, Stacey, save that for next week. That was the plan. So I'm going to do it. All right. So I'm going to let us wrap up here because we are going to have you back. So why don't you one more time, give everybody your website, and then we will definitely make sure when we come back next week, we dive in more to this. And everybody, again, we're asking you from your homework assignment, if you know your Myers-Briggs, right? I'm guessing that that's good. But if not, then we want you to go to Naomi's website. Naomi, give that website one more time.
It's brandwhisperers.com.au.
Perfect. We'll have it in the show notes page. Go take it, because then we're going to break down where our folks fit into each of these categories and the traps they fall into. Sound good?
Wonderful. I so can't wait. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. You bet. It was my pleasure. I just find everything that Naomi talks about by looking at these personality assessments, these 4-letter codes, and how she explains like the car model to really understand the category you fall into, whether it's a corporate, right, individualist, traditionalist, change maker, or life seeker, how she uses those groupings to then help you understand how best to run your business. And of course, she's coming back with us next week to talk about the traps that those folks fall into based on their category when it comes to running your business. So I know you have one personality type and you've got to listen to her talk about them all, but that's for the benefit of everybody, right? So if you don't know your Myers-Briggs personality type, you can certainly go to her website and be able to take the assessment. I did it before we actually did the interview, so she kind of knew what I was. And you can take the assessment and then know what your code is. And if you need to go back and listen to when she talks about what group you're in, and then how best to run your business. And then you'll have that information when she comes back next week. And she talks about, of course, the big trap that you may be falling into when it comes to running your business. You may just learn something about yourself. So her website is brandwhisperers.com.au. And we will definitely link to this in the show notes episode on the show notes page. And the show notes page for this episode is stacybrownrandall.com/198. stacybrownrandall.com/198. Just go there. And of course, it'll relink you over to the show notes page. And then you can check out the link on that page for brandwhisperers.com.au. And I'm very excited that we are going to have her back with us next week for episode 199. And we'll talk about the traps you sometimes fall into in running your business based on your personality. Until then, take control and grow your business. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. To access all resources and links mentioned in today's show and to connect with Stacey, head over to www.stacybrownrandall.com.